In this video, we are going to use the query method for a feature layer object that returns a feature set. A feature set allows you to access individual features from a feature layer. So open up the query.py script from the data folder. A feature layer object has a query method that returns what's known as a feature set. And from that feature set, we can get access to all the features in the data set. You can, of course, use the query method to return a subset of features represented in the feature set. Let's head over to the documentation, starting with the feature layer object query method. Here we have the query method for the feature layer, and we can see there are quite a lot of parameters here to use. The good news is they are all optional. It does state here that the query method queries a feature layer based on an SQL statement. We take a look at some of the parameters. We have the where parameter, that is an optional string, that is an SQL clause. When we don't use this, the default is 1 = 1. We can set what fields we want to be output for each feature. The field name and the attribute value is returned. Instead of using the where clause, you can also supply in a list of object IDs. I'll just correct myself there. It's not a list of object IDs. It is a string. That is a list of object IDs. We can see here the object ID values should be comma separated. Scroll down, we'll check on some more of the parameters. We can apply a geometry filter. We can set return geometry to be false, so only the attribute information is returned and not the geometry values. You can return IDs only. This will return the object IDs as a list, where the object IDs represent the features that satisfied the where clause. And I urge you to go and read through all the different parameters available for the query, and after this video maybe try apply some for yourself. If I scroll down the bottom, you can see that it returns a feature set, and this feature set contains the features matching the query unless another return type is specified. I'm going to click into the feature set here and we'll go to the documentation for the feature set. Feature set is a set of features with information about their fields, field aliases, geometry type, spatial reference, and more. We're going to take a look at quite a number of the feature set properties, with the main event being the feature. So a feature set contains feature objects. If I click into the feature link here, you can find the documentation for the feature. A feature is an entity located in space with a set of properties that can be represented as features. We're going to access a feature and we will print off some of the properties to see what is available. So let's head back over to our Python script. We're going to query a feature layer to return a feature set, and then we're going to dig into the features for that feature set returned. And we'll take a look at the feature set and feature layer objects. We first access ArcGIS Online using the GIS class and supplying our home string. We'll assign our GIS object to a variable called AGOL. We then use our GIS object content manager get method, supplying our feature service item ID, which I'll paste in now. The get method will return an item object that will assign to a variable called item. We then use our item object and the layers property, and we're interested in our park boundaries layer, which sits at index 2. The layers property is a list of feature layer objects. And we'll assign the feature layer object representing our park boundaries to a variable called FL, that stands for feature layer. In our first example, we are going to query a feature layer and return a feature set. We call upon our feature layer object and use the query method with no parameters, and we'll assign feature set being returned from the query to a variable called feature set. We'll print the type of that variable to screen to see that it is a feature set object, and we'll also print the feature set variable itself. I'll run the script. Our script is ran. Let's check the output. We can see that it was a feature set object returned from the query. Now if we dig into the feature set that was printed, we can see it has a property called features. The features property is a list, and it is a list of dictionaries. Well, it is JSON, but it looks like a dictionary. List of dictionaries that represents each feature. We see we have the geometry, and that geometry is represented by rings because park boundaries are polygons. And And then we have an attributes property for our feature. And we can see the field name and the attribute. So we have object ID in one, park name and Clonbelogue, and so on. And that is returned for all the park boundaries. Once we hit the end of our features list, we have some other properties that we can see: the object ID field name, object ID, the global ID field name, spatial reference for the dataset. We can see the information here for 4326. The geometry type is Esri geometry polygon. And then we can see the fields information, which is similar to what is printed when you access the feature layer properties field property. We have all the information on our fields there, including domains. I'll comment out our first example. And in our second example, we are going to print the screen properties of the feature set. Just like above, we're going to call the feature layer object and use the query method and assign the feature set returned to a variable called feature set. But I'm going to use the feature set object and call upon several properties. Does it have M values? Has Z, the fields, the display field name, the global ID field name, the object ID field name, the spatial reference, the geometry type, and the features. And we just saw these 5 in the feature set that we printed the screen. We can use .value to return the feature set as a dictionary, and then we'll print the keys to screen so we can see the properties available. And you can also return the feature set as a pandas data frame using .df. I'll run the script. We can see for has M and has Z are both false. And then we printed out the fields. This field information is a list, and it matches when you print out using the feature layer object properties property and the fields property that we've seen in the field section of this course. Scroll down, we got none for display field name. We do not have a display field name set. The global ID field is global ID. The object ID field is object ID. And we see the information for the spatial reference here for 4326 for WGS84. The geometry type is Esri geometry polygon. We then printed all the features to screen. So we can see that it is a list, and each list is a dictionary-like structure that contains geometry and attributes. Now if I scroll down, we see the exact same here that was printed as a dictionary, and then we printed the dictionary keys. So let's take a look at what's available. We have features. These are feature objects when it's through a feature set. When it's turned into a dictionary, these features will be available as a list of dictionaries. We have our object ID field name, our global ID field name, our spatial reference, our geometry type, and our fields. So these make up the properties that are returned in a feature set object that we saw when we printed the initial feature set to screen. And of course, we printed as a pandas data frame also. I'm just going to clear the terminal down here, and I'll open up the next example. Once more, we are going to call upon our feature layer object and use the query method, but this time we are going to use some parameters. We'll set the where parameter to be park name equals, and we'll get the FDM park boundary. We'll set the out fields to be park name and also the park status. We'll set return geometry to be false. We do not want the geometry returned. And I'll leave it at that for now. I'll comment out this part down here, and I'm just going to run and print off the feature set for our current query. So we're using a where clause to get one park boundary returned. We want 2 field names, and we don't want the geometry. I'll run the script. Our script is ran. We can see for the feature set, we have our features property, and it is a list. And that list contains a dictionary that has attributes, and you can see an object ID of 7, park name of FDM Park, and the park status as open. So even though our out fields only said park name and park status, the object ID was also returned. We were also returned the other properties: object ID field name, global ID field name, spatial reference, geometry type, and fields. I'm going to comment out where we printed the feature set, and we are going to print some of the feature object properties to screen. So we see here we're going to create a variable called feature. We're accessing our feature set object and accessing the first feature object from that feature set. If we look down below, we have our features here as a list, and we're accessing this first feature object. We're going to print as dict, print as row, print the attributes, the fields, and the geometry type for our feature. Before running, I just noticed that I have feature set here instead of feature. We are printing the properties for a feature object and not for our feature set that we've already seen. And now I'll run the script. And we can see as dict, return it as a dictionary. It looks the same, but in the back end, it's not JSON now, it's a dictionary. We then printed it as a row, and you can see that we returned a tuple that has two lists. The first list contains the attributes, and the second list contains the field names. So object ID of 7, park name, FDM Park, and park status open. We then just printed the attributes. You can see it is a dictionary where the key is the field name and the value is the attribute value. And then we just printed the fields, which is a list of field names, starting with our object ID, park name, and park status. And the geometry type is table, because we did not return geometry with this query. Let's take a look at that. If I comment out printing all those except for the geometry type, and I set return geometry to true, and click run, and we can see it's polygon. I'll comment out printing geometry type, and I'll also comment out accessing the feature. I'm going to set return geometry to false and return IDs only. We'll set that to equal true, and then we'll print what is returned from the query as the feature set variable. I'll rerun the script. And we can see that a dictionary was returned with two keys: object ID field name, which is object ID, and an object ID's key, that is a list containing one single object ID in there based on our where clause. The out fields are not honored, neither is the return geometry, even if it was set to true. I'll comment out that example and open up the last example. It's going to be similar to above. I'm going to remove this object IDs, and I'll keep return geometry as false, and I'm not going to use a where clause. So we're creating a feature set object from a feature layer object query method, where we're going to just keep the out fields as park name and park status, and we won't return the geometry. And then for each feature in our feature set, we're going to print the feature object attributes property, where it is park name, to screen. You can also use the feature get value method and supply in the field name parameter to retrieve the same information. So here we are iterating over features returned in a feature set. I'll run the script, and we can see for each park boundary, the attributes and accessing using the dictionary style syntax is the same as using the feature get value method, where our park names are returned based on the park name attribute that we were querying. We've only scratched the surface there with querying feature sets and features. I urge you to go check out the documentation and play around with the different properties and methods available. Make sure to continue on to the next video in this series, and also make sure to subscribe. Take care.